My name is Jarvis Thompson, and I just turned 29 last month. For years, I kept my success a secret from my status-obsessed family. Every Thanksgiving dinner was the same ritual of criticism and judgment about my career choices. I dreaded facing my Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert again this year, knowing they would label me as the family disappointment. Little did they know that everything would change when that magazine arrived at the dinner table. Before I continue my story about how my family's jaws dropped that night, let me know where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever been underestimated by the people who should support you the most. The Thompson family has always been synonymous with prestige and accomplishment. My father was a federal judge before he passed, my mother a neurosurgeon, and my extended family comprised a collection of lawyers, doctors, investment bankers, and corporate executives. Success wasn't just encouraged in our family. It was expected, and only through very specific traditional paths. I was always the outlier. While I excelled academically and earned my way into Harvard, I never felt the passion for conventional careers that seemed to run in our bloodline. During my third year studying economics, I became fascinated with emerging cybersecurity challenges and developed an algorithm that could potentially revolutionize how systems detected intrusions. The idea consumed me, and after months of internal debate, I made the decision that would become family taboo for years to come. I dropped out of Harvard. You would have thought I announced plans to join a cult. My mother cried for days. Uncle Robert, the family patriarch who managed the Thompson fortune, called it a phase of rebellion and assured everyone I would come to my senses. Aunt Patricia, his wife and a senior partner at Goldman Sachs, couldn't even look at me during the following family gathering. My cousins Jackson, the surgeon, and Amanda, the corporate attorney, exchanged knowing glances that clearly communicated their thoughts. Jarvis had finally cracked under pressure. Only my grandfather, William, who had built and sold a manufacturing company before retiring, showed any semblance of understanding. Innovation rarely follows the expected path, he told me privately, slipping me a check that would become my first seed money. I rented a tiny apartment in Oakland with my college friend Lucas, who believed in my vision enough to join as my first employee. We converted our living room into an office, sleeping on mattresses in the corner and surviving on ramen and coffee. For 18 months, we coded day and night, refining the adaptive security protocols that would eventually become SecureSphere. The early days were brutal. I burned through my savings and maxed out 3 credit cards. Twice I had to borrow money from Lucas to make rent. Every family gathering became an exercise in psychological endurance. "Still playing with your computer games?" Aunt Patricia would ask over wine. Uncle Robert would follow with offers to talk to some people about entry-level positions at respectable firms. Even my mother, though supportive in private, would introduce me to her colleagues' daughters with apologetic explanations about my transitional period. After 2 years of development, we finally had a working prototype that caught the attention of a few angel investors. We secured a small round of funding that allowed us to move into a proper office and hire 3 more developers. The technology was promising but still unproven in the marketplace, and the financial pressure remained intense. Then came the breakthrough. Our security system detected and neutralized a major attack on one of our beta clients, a regional bank, preventing what could have been a catastrophic data breach. Word spread quickly throughout the financial technology sector. Within months, we were implementing our system in mid-size banks across the country. TechCorp, one of the largest technology conglomerates in the world, took notice. After a series of meetings and due diligence that lasted 6 months, they made an offer to acquire SecureSphere for $3.6 billion, with the condition that I would stay on to lead the security division. The deal was finalized, but wouldn't be publicly announced until the following week. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. The annual Thompson family Thanksgiving dinner was scheduled 3 days before the public announcement. For years, I had endured their judgment and dismissal. For years, I had sat silently as they questioned my choices and mourned my potential. This year would be different. I made a decision that might seem petty to some, but felt like poetic justice to me. I would attend the dinner as usual, endure their condescension one last time, and wait for the perfect moment to reveal the truth. What I didn't anticipate was how their reactions would affect me, or what I would learn about myself and my family in the process. The annual Thompson family Thanksgiving dinner had evolved into something far more elaborate than a simple holiday gathering. It had become a curated showcase of achievements, a forum for subtle competition, and for me, a gauntlet of judgment and disappointment. The tradition had started decades ago, when my grandfather William built his manufacturing business into a regional powerhouse. As the family grew in wealth and status, the dinners transformed from warm celebrations into formal affairs where accomplishments were currency and failure was not tolerated. My earliest memories of these dinners were actually pleasant. As a child prodigy with perfect grades and national math competition trophies, I had been the family's rising star. Uncle Robert would ruffle my hair and tell everyone I would be running the Federal Reserve someday. Aunt Patricia would introduce me as our little genius. Even my cousins looked at me with a mixture of jealousy and respect. Those days seemed like ancient history now. Each year followed a predictable pattern. We would gather at Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia's mansion in Westchester County, an imposing colonial revival on 5 acres with a view of the Long Island Sound. The adults would sip expensive scotch in the mahogany-paneled library while discussing market trends and political connections. The younger generation would separate into clusters based on career paths and accomplishments, careful networking even within family circles. Dinner would begin with Uncle Robert's traditional toast to the Thompson legacy of excellence, followed by each adult family member sharing their professional highlights from the past year. My cousin Jackson would detail his groundbreaking surgical techniques. Amanda would humble brag about her latest high-profile corporate merger. My other cousins would each take turns. Thomas with his hedge fund performance, Stephanie with her pharmaceutical research, and Elizabeth with her architectural awards. When my turn came, the room would grow quiet with anticipation that gradually morphed into uncomfortable silence as I spoke about algorithm improvements or security innovations that no one understood or valued. Eyes would dart to plates. Someone would inevitably change the subject. Later, in what they thought were private conversations, I would overhear terms like wasted potential and such a shame. The Thompson Family Foundation, which funded scholarships and hospital wings, always with the family name prominently displayed, became another source of tension. At 30 years old, each Thompson received a position on the board and access to networking opportunities that could accelerate careers. My 30th birthday was approaching, and there had been whispers about whether I would be granted the traditional role given my unconventional choices. After dropping out of Harvard, I experienced failures that seemed to validate my family's concerns. My first attempt at building a security solution crashed spectacularly during a demonstration for potential investors. A partnership with a college friend dissolved over intellectual property disagreements. For 6 months, I coded security protocols for a financial startup that ultimately folded before launching. During those dark periods, self-doubt crept in like a virus, corrupting my confidence. There were nights I lay awake wondering if my family was right. Perhaps I was delusional. Perhaps the traditional path would have brought more success and happiness. Perhaps I had thrown away my future on a technological pipe dream. What kept me going was the elegant functionality of the core algorithm I had developed. Each failure taught me something new, and the technology evolved. I pivoted from a consumer-focused application to an enterprise solution that addressed more complex security challenges. After 3 years of refinement, SecureSphere could anticipate and neutralize threats that other systems couldn't even detect. When the CEO of TechCorp first reached out, I assumed it was for a minor acquisition or talent hire. 4 rounds of meetings later, I sat across from him as he laid out plans to integrate my technology across their entire global infrastructure and make it the cornerstone of their security offerings. The final acquisition figure, $3.6 billion, seemed surreal even as I signed the paperwork. The deal came with strict confidentiality clauses until the public announcement. Only Lucas and my legal team knew the details. I hadn't even told my mother or grandfather, wanting the revelation to be complete when I finally disclosed it. Perhaps there was something childish in my desire to unveil it dramatically at the family dinner, but after years of dismissal, I craved that moment of vindication. As Thanksgiving approached, I received the usual perfunctory invitation from Aunt Patricia's assistant. This year, rather than making excuses or preparing myself for humiliation, I accepted immediately. For once, I was looking forward to the Thompson family dinner. Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia's mansion looked particularly imposing that evening, its colonial columns illuminated by strategic landscape lighting, the circular driveway filled with luxury vehicles that resembled a high-end car dealership showcase. I parked my 4-year-old Toyota between Jackson's Maserati and Amanda's Mercedes, a deliberate choice that I knew would not go unnoticed. The grand foyer, with its marble floors and sweeping staircase, buzzed with conversation as uniformed staff circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I straightened my tie and took a deep breath before stepping through the massive oak doors. The familiar scent of Aunt Patricia's pretentious seasonal potpourri hit me immediately, along with the weight of 24 pairs of eyes that turned to assess my arrival. Jarvis, Aunt Patricia approached with practiced enthusiasm, air kissing near both my cheeks. We weren't sure you would make it this year. Such a pleasant surprise. Her eyes performed a quick evaluation of my attire, a subtle frown indicating that my off-the-rack suit had failed to meet her standards. I wouldn't miss our family tradition, I replied with equal insincerity, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing server. Uncle Robert emerged from a cluster of conversation, martini in hand. The prodigal nephew returns, he announced loudly enough for nearby relatives to hear. How's the computer business these days? Still fighting off hackers and whatnot? His dismissive tone reduced years of my innovative work to a trivial hobby. Security technology is evolving quickly, I answered neutrally. Our solutions are being implemented in several financial institutions now. Wonderful, wonderful, he nodded without interest, already looking past me toward more important guests. Oh, you must say hello to your cousin Jackson. Did you hear he pioneered a new surgical technique? Featured in the New England Journal of Medicine last month. Before I could respond, I was steered toward Jackson, who stood holding court among admiring relatives. His surgical accomplishments had grown more impressive with each passing year, along with his ego and collection of Italian suits. Jarvis, he acknowledged with the confidence of someone who knew his place in the family hierarchy was secure. Still working on that app or whatever it is. It's an enterprise security platform, I corrected for what felt like the 100th time. And yes, we've had some significant developments recently. Good for you, sticking with it, he said with the condescending encouragement one might offer a child struggling with a science fair project. Persistence is important. Not everyone can be cutting edge in their field, but there's dignity in trying. My cousin Amanda approached, champagne flute in one hand and her smartphone in the other. Always working, always connected, she was the embodiment of corporate ambition. Jarvis, I heard someone mention you were coming. How unexpected. She glanced at my shoes, another apparent failure of my wardrobe. I don't think we've seen you since last Christmas. You're so hard to track down these days. The reality was that I hadn't been invited to any family functions outside the major holidays in years, a deliberate exclusion that everyone pretended was my choice. I've been focused on building the company, I explained. We've been in some intensive negotiations recently. Negotiations? How exciting, Amanda replied with transparent skepticism. With investors? Or just the landlord of your office space? The pause was deliberate, a reminder that my business wasn't considered legitimate enough to warrant real office space in the Thompson worldview. Throughout the pre-dinner mingling, the pattern continued. Each conversation contained subtle digs about my career choices, thinly veiled suggestions about real jobs I might consider, and rapid transitions to more impressive family members' accomplishments. Cousin Thomas made sure to mention his fund's 30% returns. Stephanie detailed her pharmaceutical patent applications. Elizabeth described the sustainable urban renewal project that had earned her recognition from the mayor. I nodded and sipped my champagne, letting each barb land without reaction. In previous years, these interactions would have left me defensive and demoralized. Tonight, they merely reinforced the satisfaction I would soon feel. My grandfather, William, now 84 and moving slower than in previous years, made his way to my side during a momentary lull in the social posturing. Despite his diminished physical presence, his eyes remained sharp and perceptive. "You seem different this year," he observed quietly. "More at peace." I smiled genuinely for the first time that evening. "Things are going well, Grandpa." "Really well." He patted my arm with a knowing look. "I've always believed in betting on the uncommon path. The family could use a reminder about that occasionally." Before he could say more, Aunt Patricia's voice rang out announcing dinner was served. We processed into the formal dining room where the massive mahogany table gleamed under chandelier light, elaborately set with the Waterford crystal and Wedgwood china that made an appearance only for these occasions. As I took my assigned seat between a second cousin twice removed and a family friend whose connection I had never quite understood, I noticed something unexpected at my place setting. I had been moved further down the table than in previous years, now seated among the least accomplished family members and peripheral guests. In the Thompson dinner hierarchy, this was a deliberate statement about my perceived standing. I suppressed a smile at the irony. In less than an hour, the carefully arranged seating chart would become a physical manifestation of how thoroughly they had misjudged me. The formal dining room hummed with the sounds of silver against fine china, and the restrained conversations of people raised to discuss controversial topics only in private. The first course, a lobster bisque that Aunt Patricia imported from her favorite chef in Maine, provided the backdrop for Uncle Robert's traditional opening toast. "To the Thompson family," he proclaimed, raising his crystal glass. "Another year of excellence and achievement. May we continue to uphold the standards that have distinguished our name for generations." Everyone drank appreciatively, and then the ritual began. One by one, each family member shared their professional accomplishments from the past year, a tradition that had evolved from genuine updates into an orchestrated display of one-upmanship. Jackson went first, describing in clinical detail the revolutionary spinal surgery technique he had developed. "The procedure reduces recovery time by 60%, he explained, casually dropping names of hospital boards that had consulted him. "Johns Hopkins is flying me out next month to train their top neurosurgical team." Amanda followed with an account of the $3 billion merger she had orchestrated. "The Wall Street Journal called it the most seamless integration in the industry," she noted with practiced modesty. "The client has already retained me for their next acquisition." Thomas detailed his hedge fund's exceptional performance despite market volatility. Stephanie announced her research had entered FDA trials. Elizabeth described the international award her architectural firm had received for innovation in sustainable design. As the spotlight moved around the table, I could feel the moment approaching when attention would turn to me. In previous years, I had dreaded this part, scrambling to frame my work in terms that might impress this audience. This year I sat calmly, taking a deliberate sip of water as my turn arrived. Before I could speak, Aunt Patricia interjected. "Jarvis, dear, perhaps we should continue with the others and circle back if time permits. I understand you're still in that developmental phase with your project." The dismissal was so smoothly executed that some might have missed its cruelty. A few family members exchanged glances. My mother, seated near the head of the table by virtue of her surgical achievements, looked down at her plate. "Actually," I began, "we've had some significant developments with SecureSphere this year that I'd be happy to share." Uncle Robert waved his hand dismissively. "I'm sure it's all very technical and would go over our heads. Let's hear from people working in established fields first." The conversation moved on as if I hadn't spoken. I noticed my grandfather watching the interaction with narrowed eyes, his hand tightening around his water glass. After the main course was served, a perfectly cooked prime rib that no one at the table would fully appreciate, Aunt Patricia turned her attention back to me with the precise timing of a predator who had been waiting for the right moment to strike. "Jarvis," she said loudly enough to draw the table's attention, "your mother mentioned you moved offices recently. Finally found a proper workspace, have you?" The question was a trap, and we both knew it. My previous updates about office expansions had been met with skepticism and subtle mockery. "We did," I answered simply. "We needed more space for our growing team." "How many people are you up to now?" "Still just you and that college friend." "Luca's, was it?" Her tone suggested she was humoring a child's pretend game. "We're at 28 employees now, with positions open for 12 more. Jackson let out a low whistle. "That's a lot of overhead for a startup that isn't publicly traded. Where's the revenue coming from?" Before I could answer, Amanda jumped in. "Last I checked, venture capital was tightening its belt on unproven tech. Have you finally found someone willing to take a risk on your— what do you call it again? Security program?" "It's an adaptive cybersecurity platform," I corrected, maintaining my composure. "And yes, we've secured significant investment." Uncle Robert set down his fork with the air of someone about to deliver helpful wisdom. "Jarvis, I've been meaning to have a serious conversation with you. You're approaching 30, and these computer experiments have been an interesting diversion, but it might be time to consider your actual career path. The Thompson Group has an opening in our financial analysis division that would be appropriate for someone with your background. The salary is reasonable for an entry-level position, and there would be a clear advancement track." The offer hanging in the air was so condescending that I almost laughed. Entry-level, reasonable salary, as if I should be grateful for the opportunity to start at the bottom of his corporate ladder. "Thank you, Uncle Robert, but I'm committed to SecureSphere," I replied evenly. Aunt Patricia sighed dramatically. "Darling, this stubbornness isn't doing you any favors. Look around this table. Everyone here followed established paths and has achieved real success. Your cousins have professional credentials, published work, tangible accomplishments." "My work is tangible," I countered. "Our security protocols are preventing millions in potential data breaches." Jackson chuckled. "Preventing theoretical problems with theoretical solutions. Meanwhile, I saved 3 lives yesterday with these very hands." He held up his surgical hands as if they were religious artifacts. "The banking division I manage controls $11 billion in assets," Thomas added. "What's the valuation of your hobby company?" I opened my mouth to respond when Aunt Patricia delivered the blow she had clearly been saving. She set down her wine glass and fixed me with a stare that combined pity with exasperation. "Unemployed again?" she asked loudly, the words landing like a slap. "Let's be honest, Jarvis. You're not running a real company. You're hiding from the real world behind computer screens and fantasy technology. It's time to grow up and join the productive members of this family." A heavy silence fell over the table. Even those who might have agreed with her assessment seemed uncomfortable with the directness of the attack. My mother's face had gone pale. My grandfather, William, began to push himself up from his chair, seemingly ready to intervene, when the dining room door opened. Hendricks, the family butler who had served the Thompsons for over 20 years, entered carrying a silver tray. "Pardon the interruption," he said formally. "A courier has just delivered this for Mr. Robert." The sender indicated it was of immediate interest to the family. On the tray sat tomorrow's edition of Fortune magazine, delivered in advance to select subscribers. The timing was so perfect it almost seemed orchestrated, though I had nothing to do with it. The magazine's cover faced upward, clearly visible to everyone at the table. There, under the Fortune logo, was my face looking back at them. The headline read, "Youngest Billionaire in Tech. How Jarvis Thompson's SecureSphere Revolutionized Cybersecurity with a $3.6 billion acquisition." The dining room froze in a tableau of shock. every eye at the table fixed on the magazine cover, then shifted to my face, then back to the magazine in disbelief. The only sound was the gentle clink of Hendrix placing the silver tray on the sideboard. Aunt Patricia's mouth opened and closed without producing words, a rare moment of speechlessness for a woman who prided herself on always having the right cutting remark ready. Uncle Robert reached for the magazine with a trembling hand, nearly knocking over his wine glass in the process. "Is this some kind of joke?" he finally managed, his voice unnaturally high. I maintained my composure, though my heart was racing. "No joke, Uncle Robert. TechCorp is acquiring SecureSphere for $3.6 billion. The deal was finalized last week and goes public tomorrow morning." The magazine was now making its way around the table, passed from hand to hand like a sacred artifact. Each family member examined it closely, as if expecting to find evidence of forgery. $3.6 billion, Jackson repeated numbly. "That's billion with a B." "That's correct," I confirmed. "I retain 30% ownership and will head their new global security division." Simple arithmetic visibly played out on their faces as they calculated my personal windfall from the deal. Over $1 billion, plus the high-level executive position. In a single transaction, I had surpassed the combined wealth of everyone at the table. "But how?" Amanda asked, her corporate lawyer brain seemingly unable to process this development. "Your company wasn't even on the radar. No one was talking about SecureSphere in the financial press. We kept a low profile deliberately," I explained. "Our clients include 6 of the largest banking institutions in the world, 3 government agencies, and dozens of Fortune 500 companies. Our security protocols have prevented an estimated $4 billion in potential breach damages over the past 18 months. I allowed myself a small smile. We didn't need press coverage. Our results spoke for themselves. The silence that followed was profound. Years of dismissal, mockery, and condescension hung in the air between us, now impossible to deny or pretend away. Grandfather William broke the tension with a genuine laugh, his first real display of emotion all evening. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, raising his glass. To Jarvis, who reminds us all that innovation rarely follows the expected path. A few family members automatically raised their glasses, though most remained too stunned to participate in the toast. Aunt Patricia was the first to attempt damage control. Her shocked expression transformed into a warm smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Jarvis, darling, this is wonderful news. Why didn't you tell us sooner? We would have celebrated properly." "Would you have believed me?" I asked quietly. Her smile faltered for just a moment. "Of course we would have. Family always supports family. We've always been your biggest cheerleaders." Uncle Robert cleared his throat, businessman instincts kicking in. "This is tremendous, truly tremendous. You know, I always told everyone you had a special spark, right from childhood. Different from the others, but special in your own way." The revisionist history was breathtaking in its audacity. I noticed my mother covering a smile with her napkin. "In fact," Uncle Robert continued, warming to his new narrative, "I was telling my partners just last month that we should be looking at cybersecurity investments. I specifically mentioned your company. Perhaps now we could discuss some synergies between Thompson Group and your division at TechCorp." Jackson, never one to miss an opportunity, leaned forward eagerly. "You'll need medical advisors for your executive team, I imagine. Health tech is booming, and my hospital connections could open doors." Amanda pulled out her business card. "You'll want top-tier legal representation for your personal assets now. My firm specializes in high-net-worth portfolio management." One by one, family members who had barely acknowledged my existence minutes earlier now pitched ideas, partnerships, and connections. Business cards appeared from pockets and purses. Email addresses and phone numbers were offered. Invitations to exclusive clubs and events suddenly materialized. Throughout it all, I nodded politely, neither accepting nor rejecting their transparent attempts to associate themselves with my success. The vindication I had anticipated feeling in this moment was present, but accompanied by an unexpected hollowness. Their sudden interest felt empty and transactional, highlighting the conditional nature of their affection rather than healing the years of dismissal. Grandfather William, observing the feeding frenzy with evident distaste, caught my eye from across the table and gave me a subtle nod of understanding. He had built his own company from nothing and likely recognized the vultures circling new money. When there was finally a lull in the barrage of business propositions, I spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. I appreciate everyone's sudden interest in SecureSphere. Our executive team and board are already established, but I'll keep your offers in mind. The gentle rebuff caused visible discomfort around the table. These were people unaccustomed to rejection, especially from someone they had relegated to the bottom of their social hierarchy. What I am establishing, I continued, is a foundation focused on supporting unconventional innovators who lack traditional resources and connections. People with promising ideas who might not have the family networks or institutional backing to bring them to fruition. I turned to my grandfather. It will be called the William Thompson Innovation Fund, if you'll allow me to use your name, Grandpa, to honor the person in this family who understood that greatness sometimes comes from unexpected directions. The old man's eyes glistened with unexpected emotion. I would be honored, he said simply. Aunt Patricia, never one to remain sidelined for long, attempted to reclaim control of the narrative. What a wonderful tribute to the Thompson legacy of excellence. Perhaps we could fold this initiative into the existing family foundation. I chair the board, as you know, and we have the infrastructure already in place. Thank you, but no, I replied firmly. This will be an independent entity with its own mission and governance. The subtle power shift was palpable. For the first time in my adult life, I was dictating terms to the Thompson family rather than accepting theirs. The realization spread across their faces like a slow wave, bringing with it a mix of respect, resentment, and recalculation. As dessert was served, a triple chocolate torte that no one seemed to have much appetite for, the conversation fractured into smaller, more subdued exchanges. The unified family front had cracked, revealing individual reactions to the seismic shift in dynamics. Some relatives approached with seemingly genuine congratulations. Others whispered among themselves, no doubt assessing how my new status affected their own positions in the family hierarchy. Uncle Robert made one more attempt as coffee was being poured. You know, Jarvis, wealth management is a complex field. New money comes with new challenges. The Thompson Group has over a century of experience preserving family fortunes. Perhaps we should schedule a private meeting to discuss your portfolio strategy. I met his gaze directly. My financial team is already in place, Uncle Robert, but thank you for the offer. The subtle rejection hung between us, a reversal of power so complete that he seemed momentarily unable to process it. For decades, he had been the family's financial authority, the one who determined which ventures were worthy of Thompson capital and which family members deserved access to opportunities. Now, his expertise was being politely declined by the nephew he had dismissed for years. As the evening began to wind down, I noticed my grandfather motioning me toward the library. I excused myself from a one-sided conversation with a suddenly attentive cousin and followed him into the book-lined sanctuary, where the most important family discussions had always taken place. The Thompson family library, with its leather-bound volumes and hunting trophies, had always intimidated me as a child. It was where Uncle Robert held court on financial matters, where family alliances were formed, and where the real power dynamics played out away from the formal dining room. Tonight it felt different. The space seemed smaller somehow, less imposing, as if my new perspective had shrunk its significance. Grandfather William closed the heavy door behind us and shuffled toward his favorite wingback chair. At 84, he moved with the deliberate care of someone who refused to acknowledge physical limitations, but respected their reality. That was quite a show, he said, lowering himself into the chair. Better than any theater on Broadway. I smiled, relaxing for the first time that evening. Not exactly how I planned to break the news, but the timing couldn't have been more perfect. Patricia's face alone was worth the price of admission, he chuckled. I haven't seen her that speechless since her plastic surgeon accidentally paralyzed half her forehead last year. We shared a laugh, the conspiratorial moment feeling like a return to my childhood when he would slip me cookies before dinner and wink about our secret. I meant what I said about the foundation, I told him. You were the only one who believed in me when it wasn't fashionable. The only one who understood taking risks. He waved away my gratitude. I recognized something in you that reminded me of myself. The family likes to forget that I started in a garage with second-hand equipment and a loan from my uncle that everyone called foolish. They've revised history to make it seem like the Thompson success began with banking and law degrees. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment before his expression turned more serious. You know they're going to come at you from every angle now. Robert and Patricia are already recalibrating their approach. By tomorrow, they'll have convinced themselves they always supported you. I noticed, I said dryly. The question is, what will you do with this moment? Revenge is tempting. God knows they've earned it. But I've lived long enough to see how that path usually ends. I considered his words carefully. I don't want revenge. I searched for the right description. Respect. Acknowledgement. Maybe just to never hear unemployed again at another family dinner. You'll get that now, he nodded. Money and success are the only languages they're fluent in. But be careful about mistaking their newfound interest for genuine connection. As if summoned by our conversation, there was a gentle knock at the door. Aunt Patricia entered without waiting for a response, her recovery apparently complete as she carried 2 crystal tumblers of amber liquid. There you are, my 2 favorite innovators, she said with newfound warmth. I thought you might enjoy the special reserve scotch. 30-year-old Macallan. We save it for truly momentous occasions. She set the glasses down on the side table, then perched on the arm of a nearby chair with practiced elegance. Jarvis, darling, I hope there are no hard feelings about our little exchange at dinner. Family can be brutally honest with each other because of our deep bonds, don't you think? We've always pushed each other to excellence. The revisionist history was so transparent it was almost comical. I took a sip of the scotch, which was indeed exceptional, before responding. Of course, Aunt Patricia. I especially appreciated your honesty about my unemployment status right before learning about my billion-dollar acquisition. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Water under the bridge. What matters now is supporting you in this exciting new chapter. Which reminds me, the Thompson Foundation Gala is next month. As our newest success story, you simply must be featured. The governor will be there, along with several senators. Perfect networking opportunities for your new position. I noted how quickly I had transformed from family embarrassment to promotional asset. I'll check my calendar, I replied noncommittally. Wonderful. And perhaps we could schedule lunch next week. There are several family investment opportunities that would benefit from your unique perspective. Exclusive opportunities, typically reserved for the core family governance circle. The same circle that had deliberately excluded me for years. As I mentioned at dinner, my schedule is quite full with the transition, I said pleasantly. But I appreciate the invitation. Before she could press further, the library door opened again. Uncle Robert entered, followed closely by my cousins Jackson and Amanda, all wearing expressions of eager conviviality that had never before been directed at me. There he is, Uncle Robert boomed. The man of the hour. We were just discussing the family banking services. With your new liquidity situation, you'll want sophisticated management strategies. Amanda's been working with several tech founders on their post-acquisition positioning. Amanda nodded eagerly. I've developed specialized knowledge in this exact scenario. I could come by your office tomorrow to review options. And we should discuss your healthcare portfolio, Jackson added. Many new executives neglect comprehensive wellness strategies. My concierge medical group could create a personalized program. The barrage continued, each family member pitching services, connections, and opportunities with the zeal of commission-based salespeople facing quota deadlines. The irony was palpable. The same relatives who couldn't be bothered to understand my work now presented themselves as essential partners in my success. I met my grandfather's eyes across the room. The slight shake of his head confirmed we were thinking the same thing. "I appreciate everyone's suggestions," I said, standing up. "It's getting late, and I have an early meeting tomorrow with the integration team. We can discuss all this another time." Uncle Robert placed a hand on my shoulder, his grip firmer than necessary. "Before you go, we should talk about the family fund. As you know, each Thompson traditionally contributes a percentage of annual income. Given your new circumstances, we would welcome a significant commitment. Several naming opportunities have recently become available at the hospital wing and university library." The request was so nakedly opportunistic that even Aunt Patricia seemed to recognize it had overstepped. She shot her husband a warning glance. "What Robert means is that we're all so proud to welcome you into the family leadership circle. Your perspective would be invaluable on the foundation board." I gently removed Uncle Robert's hand from my shoulder. "I'll consider it. But as I mentioned, my priority will be establishing the William Thompson Innovation Fund. I believe in supporting paths that might not look promising by conventional standards." The implied criticism hung in the air. Grandfather William made no attempt to hide his satisfied smile. As I moved toward the door, a thought occurred to me. I turned back to face them. "By the way, I've scheduled a press conference tomorrow afternoon to announce the acquisition and my future plans. I've been asked about my background and influences. Any preferences for how I should describe the family's support of my unconventional career path?" The question landed exactly as intended. Expressions of alarm flashed across their faces as they processed the potential public relations implications. "Family is always supportive, even when we have different perspectives," Aunt Patricia responded quickly. "We've always believed in your potential, Jarvis. That's the Thompson way." "Absolutely," Uncle Robert agreed with forced heartiness. "The family has always stood behind your innovative vision, 100%. I nodded as if considering their suggestion. "I'll be sure to mention your consistent encouragement and unwavering belief in my abilities. How you celebrated each milestone and never doubted my path." The collective relief in the room was palpable, though my grandfather's knowing smirk suggested he understood exactly what I was doing. "Well, good night, everyone," I said, moving toward the door. "It's been an illuminating evening." As I retrieved my coat from Hendrix in the foyer, my mother appeared from the drawing room. Unlike the others, her expression showed genuine happiness untainted by calculation. "I always knew," she said, simply embracing me. "Even when I worried, I knew you would find your way." I returned her hug, realizing that her concerns had come from love rather than judgment. "I know, Mom, and I understand why you worried." "Are you happy?" she asked, the question cutting through all the financial details to the heart of what mattered. I considered carefully before answering. "I'm satisfied with what we've built. The technology will make a difference. But I'm still figuring out what happiness looks like." She nodded, wisdom in her eyes. "That's the real work, isn't it? The money just gives you freedom to figure it out." As I drove away from the mansion, watching it shrink in my rearview mirror, I felt strangely light. The vindication had been sweet, certainly, but more valuable was the clarity it provided about the nature of the relationships in my life, and the kind of relationships I wanted to build moving forward. 6 weeks after the fateful Thanksgiving dinner, I sat in my new office overlooking San Francisco Bay. The TechCorp integration was proceeding smoothly, and the market had responded enthusiastically to the acquisition. Our team had expanded to 68 people, with Lucas now heading our research division. The Forbes and Fortune interviews had come and gone, along with features in the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg. The office phone rang, and my assistant informed me that my grandfather was in the lobby. I immediately went down to greet him personally, finding him admiring the massive interactive security display in the reception area. "Quite a step up from that Oakland apartment," he observed with a smile. "Just a bit," I agreed, embracing him. "Come on up. The view is worth the trip alone." In my office, he walked straight to the floor-to-ceiling windows and gazed out at the bay, the winter sunlight glinting off the water. At 84, he still stood tall, though the slight tremor in his hands had become more pronounced in recent months. "I brought you something," he said, placing a worn leather portfolio on my desk. "Found it while going through some old storage boxes." Inside was a yellowed newspaper from 1962, featuring a small article about a new manufacturing process developed by William Thompson, a local entrepreneur with unconventional ideas. The headline read, "Thompson Innovation Challenges Industry Standards." "My first press mention," he explained. "Before the company took off, before the family fortune, before the Thompson name meant anything to anyone. I was 32, and everyone thought I was crazy." I handled the fragile paper carefully, seeing the parallels between our journeys with new clarity. "Thank you for sharing this with me, and for the seed money that kept us going when no one else would invest." He waved away my gratitude. "Best investment I ever made, both financially and personally." "Which reminds me, how's the foundation coming along?" "The William Thompson Innovation Fund received approval last week," I told him. "We've secured initial funding of $50 million and established the selection committee. I want to focus on founders from unconventional backgrounds, people without access to traditional networks and capital." "Like a college dropout with a security algorithm?" he asked with a knowing smile. "Exactly like that," I nodded. "People with the right ideas, but the wrong pedigree or connections." We discussed the foundation's structure over lunch, with my grandfather offering insights from his decades of experience. Despite his age, his mind remained sharp, particularly when it came to evaluating business potential and character. "Have you heard from the rest of the family?" he asked as we finished our meal. I couldn't help but laugh. "Oh, constantly. Uncle Robert calls weekly about synergy opportunities. Aunt Patricia has invited me to every social function on the eastern seaboard. Jackson wants to explore medtech security applications, whatever that means. And Amanda has sent 3 different proposals for legal services." "And how are you handling it?" I considered the question carefully. "Politely but distantly. I return calls, acknowledge invitations, but maintain boundaries. Professional respect without pretending the past didn't happen." He nodded approvingly. "Wise approach. Neither burning bridges nor allowing yourself to be used." "The funny thing is," I continued, "I spent years craving their approval, imagining how satisfying it would be to finally get it. Now that I have their attention, I realize it's not what I actually wanted." "What did you want?" "Validation, I guess. Proof that my path was legitimate. But the real validation came from creating something valuable, not from their recognition of it." My grandfather looked out at the bay thoughtfully. "The most important lesson I learned in business wasn't about strategy or finance. It was about understanding the difference between people who value you for what you can do for them and people who value you for who you are." The truth of his words resonated deeply. In the weeks since the acquisition had become public, I'd experienced a flood of reconnection attempts from distant relatives, former classmates, and acquaintances who had previously shown no interest in my work. Each message and call carried the same underlying current. Access to opportunity, proximity to success, the reflected glow of achievement. In contrast, Lucas had worked alongside me through the leanest times, believing in the vision when there was no guarantee of reward. My mother had worried but never withdrawn her love. And my grandfather had seen potential where others saw only risk. "I'm establishing a scholarship program as well," I told him, "for students pursuing unconventional paths in technology and security. Full ride with mentorship and internship opportunities." "Your grandmother would have loved that," he said quietly. She always believed education should be about discovering your own path, not following prescribed routes. We spent the afternoon talking about his early business challenges and my plans for the security division. The conversation flowed naturally, unburdened by the judgment and positioning that had characterized family interactions for so long. As my grandfather prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you." After that Thanksgiving dinner, Robert and Patricia called an emergency family meeting to discuss the Thompson approach to your new status. They were quite concerned about how you might portray the family's support in your press interviews. I laughed, imagining their panic. I wondered about that. What was the consensus? They drafted a family statement emphasizing how the Thompsons have always valued innovation and supported each member's unique journey, he said with a wry smile. Quite a revision of history. Did they actually believe I would publicly criticize the family? They believed you had the power to do so, which was a new and uncomfortable position for them. Power has shifted, Jarvis. They're now the ones seeking approval. After he left, I stood at the window watching the sunset paint the bay in shades of gold and crimson. The view from Success was certainly beautiful, but I found myself reflecting on the journey rather than the destination. The greatest lesson hadn't been about proving critics wrong or achieving vindication. It had been about discovering that true success comes from building something valuable and surrounding yourself with people who believe in your vision, not just your achievements. The notification sound from my computer interrupted my thoughts. A message from Lucas about a promising candidate he'd interviewed, a young programmer with an unusual approach to encryption protocols. No formal education beyond high school, but remarkable intuitive understanding of security vulnerabilities. "Reminds me of someone I used to know," his message concluded. "Worth taking a chance." I smiled and typed my response. "Absolutely. The unconventional path sometimes leads to the most innovative destinations." As I prepared to leave the office, I thought about the family dinner coming up at Christmas. For the first time, I would attend not seeking approval or dreading judgment, but simply as myself, comfortable with the path I had chosen and the person I had become. The vindication of success was sweet, but the freedom from needing validation was sweeter still. My worth had never actually depended on their recognition, and understanding that truth was perhaps the most valuable outcome of all. Have you ever been underestimated by family members or had your choices questioned, only to be proven right in the end? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey of persistence and vindication resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences. And remember, sometimes the people who believe in you the least can motivate you the most. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their unconventional path might just lead to extraordinary success. Thank you for listening to my story today.